Product provided by Nintendo for Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition.
When I temporarily linked with U-DO, I climbed the ladder of evolution and saw the leaning tower of culture that humans have struggled to construct. It's not even a tower, really. It's a scaffold of rotting wood, built with meager knowledge and pitiful tools.
It has all been a sacred sacrifice, so that I may transcend U-DO.
What's the point?
I imagine you heard from Sellers. I am the first human being to make contact with U-DO through the transfer experiment. I obtained this power then, but along with it, I was implanted with an inescapable fear. I trembled before that fear. I struggled against it and ran. And eventually, I realized that this fear was in fact what shackles people to the human realm. And to overcome that fear requires the power of a god. I sought divine power, and learned it would be granted if the relics of God were brought together as one. That's why I've come here to Mictum. Now I will transcend the fear of God. I will surpass God's existence. I will obtain Zarathustra that sleeps on Mictum, and ascend to a higher plane, to the realm of God.
U-DO will awaken soon. He feeds upon the consciousness of those who intend to awaken him, as well as those who wish to seek him.
It's gonna wake up soon.
The vengeance of a fallen god had yet to be fulfilled. These foreboding final words of the Xenoblade Genesis reveal is one of the greatest mysteries heading into the next game. We went over a long list of candidates for who that fallen god may be. Today, we blow the doors open on the Xeno lore. We will go over the hidden godlike entity at the heart of so much story, how that hidden god may make an appearance in Xenoblade Genesis, and tie together Xenogears, Xenosaga, and Xenoblade. Buckle up, because this is a big one. Hello everybody, it's your boy Jmulls, and U-DO you voodoo.
U-DO is God himself.
In today's video, I want to go over the final two candidates for who the fallen god of Xenoblade Genesis may be. As a brief recap, to end off the trailer for Xenoblade Genesis, the narrator said, "And it is here where mankind would learn that the vengeance of a fallen god had yet to be fulfilled." And I think right now the most boring possibility for who this fallen god may be is just somebody completely new. But I want to clarify something. I'm only calling it boring in the context of making a theory crafting video months and who knows, maybe a year before release, right? In the grand scheme of things, it won't matter that much. The quality of the story will be the most important element more so than anything. It's just right now we don't have much to talk about if it's somebody new, though I don't think it being somebody new is necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, depending upon how they execute on it, it could be the most exciting possibility possible. So now that we've acknowledged that, let's move into the meat and potatoes of today's video. U-DO. Now I hear you asking, what is U-DO? U-DO is one of the biggest question marks in all of Xeno lore, but he's arguably the biggest question mark and the biggest mystery that we've directly interacted with the most, outside of like maybe the conduit. Hold on, I got like a hard drive and Xenogears on top of my cases for Xenosaga over here. But if you've played the Xenosaga games, U-DO is a massive element to these stories, and you can feel his presence in all of these games. They kind of build him up to be like the big bad of everything, and a lot of the main villains that we interact with throughout Xenosaga are influenced in some way by U-DO. Some, like in the case of Dmitry Yuriev, by their fear of U-DO. So what even is U-DO? Well, buckle up, we're in for a lecture. U-DO is what is known as a wave existence. Its name is short for the Unus Mundus drive operation. It's kind of supposed to be incomprehensible in some ways. It's not a physical being like you or I, or like Shion, kos-mos, Rex, Pyra, Mithra, anyone like that, right? It's something completely different. It's a wave existence. Yeah, kind of like the wave existence from Xenogears that we talked about yesterday. And its story actually follows some similar plot beats here to the wave existence of Xenogears. And in order to properly understand what U-DO's deal is, we have to go to Microsoft Paint.
Stop it! U-DO will awaken! Once that happens, there'll be no going back!
Well, I gotta do my best Carl Sagan / Neil deGrasse Tyson bit here. What is the universe? At least in the context of Xenosaga and Xenoblade. And just as a brief disclaimer, I'm gonna use the structure we're provided in Xenosaga, and we're going to assume it works the same in Xenoblade, at least mostly. because Monolith are not subtle about Xenoblade and Xenosaga being highly connected. Everything and everybody, this is the universe. And the way that it's broken down in Xenosaga is that within this universe, you have this thing called an upper domain and a lower domain. We are in the lower domain. The lower domain is broken off again into two different pieces. You have the real number domain, which is just everything we know. You, me, Shulk, Rex, Klaus, everybody in the real number domain of the lower domain. I know this gets complicated. Trust me, I know. There's also this thing called the imaginary number domain. This is where the collective unconsciousness is. Because I don't have much space, I'll just put CU, not cucumber. For right now, you don't really need to concern yourself with the imaginary domain or the real number domain. Just understand that everything we're part of is the lower domain. But U-DO is from the upper domain. He's not the only thing in the upper domain. It's just in Xenosaga, and we assume Xenoblade, he's the only thing we know from the upper domain. He's like our only point of contact. Because U-DO, for whatever reason, giant question mark, is able to influence the lower domain. One of the big plot elements of Xenosaga is that whenever somebody gets in contact with U-DO, they're like overwhelmed by this sense of fear. U-DO's aura is just completely unmatched in this department. Occasionally, there are individuals that are able to like overcome it and withstand U-DO, but they're like rare exceptions.
I want to know you, to know your world.
You want to know me? I want to know you as well. Tell me, who are you?
I am the will of the universe. You identify me as U-DO.
You're U-DO?
What do you desire from the world?
There's a bunch of scenes like this in Xenosaga Episode 3 between Shion, the MC of Xenosaga, and U-DO. There's some notable moments in that scene, like U-DO referring to himself as the will of the universe, and then basically telling Shion, I want to know you. I also want to know your world. U-DO is a very curious existence. Then we have this scene a little bit later on in the game, where Shion is having this flashback to a time when she was with her ex called Kevin. Right after that cutscene though, this plays.
Shion, are you feeling joy?
Joy? Yes. I'm happy, very happy.
Happy?
I feel fulfilled.
By this memory?
Yes, it's a wonderful memory. The days I spent with him, feelings of warmth. I want to stay like this forever.
Forever?
Even if I were to be born again.
Eternally?
Over and over.
Over and over.
And then way later in the game, we have this cutscene with U-DO. Right after this giant ship appears called Abel's Ark. We will get back to that one though.
Shion, what fills your heart? Is it fear, sadness, or joy?
I don't know. I don't understand myself.
Are you afraid? What are you afraid of? Why are you afraid? Are you afraid of being isolated from the world? Are you afraid of people rejecting you? Are you afraid of your eventual death?
Afraid. I'm afraid. I'm afraid of being alone.
What does it mean to be alone? Is it more terrifying than death? Why does your face show such an expression?
I don't know. I don't understand anything. Help me. Please, someone help me. Tell me who I am.
U-DO's basically asking Shion, hey Shion, what is it that's filling your heart? I want to know. Is it fear? Maybe it's sadness. Maybe it's joy. Oh, I know. You got a fear of death, don't you? You don't? So what are you afraid of? Alone, huh? Afraid of being alone. Ain't that something, huh? Wait a minute, what does it even mean to be alone? Shion, why are you looking like that? But there are connections between U-DO and Xenoblade Chronicles. Okay, nothing direct, but there are elements of U-DO's story in Xenosaga that lead directly into Xenoblade. U-DO has two observational terminals into our world in the lower domain. One of them is this giant ship called Abel's Ark. Really cool looking spaceship, isn't it? Well, what if I told you we've also seen ships that look just like Abel's Ark in Xenoblade? Specifically, we see ships that look very much like Abel's Ark in Xenoblade X. X. Genuinely, there is so much lore in X, it's crazy. We go to chapter 12, and yes, this can be found, hold on, I gotta grab the thing, in the original Xenoblade X as well. In chapter 12, in the big confrontation with Luxor, he starts trauma dumping about his fear of humanity. I was indeed fearful of humanity, of your threat. And then he does this huge lore drop on the Samarians. At the dawn of the cosmos, the Samarians arrived from another plane. That might need to be its own video. But Luxor goes on how Samarians just arrive from another plane at the dawn of the cosmos, and we see what we can presume to be their initial fleet. Do these ships look familiar? Okay, sure, maybe it isn't one for one. It's not definitive proof or anything. But bro, it's a little too close for comfort, isn't it? Especially for a group of developers and writers where every time we think they're not gonna go that far, they end up going that far. Now, there could be any number of explanations for this, both lore-wise and also just design-wise. Maybe they really like the design of the ship and they just want to reuse it. That's entirely possible. Maybe there's no in-lore explanation for why Abel's Arc looks like that, and it just happened to be happenstance. Possibly. Maybe there is a connection between Abel's Arc and Ancient Samar. Maybe back when they were writing Xenosaga, they hadn't thought that far ahead, and by the time they got to Xenoblade X, they decided, hey, why don't we make a connection here? Wouldn't it be cool? There's a whole host of reasons that these ships could look like that, but it is interesting, isn't it? But now let's build up to returning to the Genesis trailer.
Yet before it all begins, I wanted you to face your past.
I talked about how Abel's Arc is one of the observational terminals that U-DO has to observe the lower domain, but he does have another one. The second is a kid named Abel, and now despite appearances, Abel is very old, and is also somebody that we have, funnily enough, interacted with a few times throughout Xenosaga, particularly in episode 3. There is another character known as Nephilim, who Shion interacts with a ton throughout Xenosaga, and it turns out that Nephilim here interacted with U-DO, but wasn't afraid of U-DO. There was something special about her, and then U-DO became interested in Nephilim and constructed Abel as his physical manifestation in the lower domain, a way for him to interact, not just with us, but also Nephilim. They are finally reunited at the end of episode 3, but crap is hitting the fan. So Nephilim and crew concoct a plan. A bold one, but a plan nonetheless. They will take Nephilim, Abel, Chaos, and Kos-mos, along with all of the Gnosis nearby, and push them somewhere else. Okay, maybe not like Patrick, this isn't Bikini Bottom, though that would be a fun collaboration. No, the plan is to dimensionally shift all of them to Lost Jerusalem, Earth, planet Dirt.
Lost Jerusalem, a planet once called Earth.
Xenoblade is the story of Earth being split into two by Klaus. Xenoblade X tells the story of a different universe's Earth, and its universe being wiped from existence. We have a point of convergence now, with these characters and these stories, because at the end of Xenoblade 3, the worlds are brought back together again to create either the old Earth again, or a whole new world. It's kind of unclear as of now, but if we work off of all of that theory, that essentially the stories of Xenosaga and Xenoblade are taking place in parallel to each other, then the endings give or take, I don't know, a few thousand years. You know, nothing big, right? Well, those endings probably match up, since we see Kos-mos drift towards Lost Jerusalem at the end of the game. Now, does this mean they have to line up? No, not particularly. It could be a different universe's Earth, or maybe the timelines don't match up as cleanly as we think. It's still up in the air, but if this is the direction they go in, it makes a lot of sense to me, because this also ties back into Xenogears. Yeah, did you think we could go a whole Xenoblade Genesis theory video without bringing up Xenogears? You see, this is when everything gets crazy. Abel and Nephilim are references. References to the two main characters. I gotta grab the thing again, hold on. It's a little bit more tricky than you think it'd be. Are references to the two main characters of Xenogears. Abel being a reference to Faye, and Nephilim being a reference to Ellie. All this time, I have operated under the idea that Eleanor from Xenoblade Genesis is a direct reference, or maybe even a legally distinct enough Ellie for the future purposes of retelling Perfect Works. That may still be the case, but what if Eleanor isn't supposed to just be a throwback to Ellie from Xenogears? What if she is a direct continuation, or descendant, or reincarnation, however they want to write this, of Nephilim? And what if Unnamed Dude is a direct continuation, descendant, or reincarnation, not necessarily of Faye or Cain from Xenogears, Genesis, but of Abel from Xenosaga. Need a bit more? Well, the power of Xenoblade Genesis is known as Anima. In Xenosaga, the person who had the power of Anima was Chaos, who helped Abel and Ellie with the dimensional shift at the end of Xenosaga 3. We actually get to see legally distinct Fae get emotional and utilize what we assume to be Anima or some kind of power in the trailer of Genesis. He gets emotional over, you guessed it, Eleanor, who he holds in his arms, and utilizes a power with a distinctive multicolored glow to it that kind of reminds me of the U-DO glow that we are shown a lot of in Xenosaga. But to be fair, the color isn't one for one. Could be an artistic change because, you know, it has been many years, or we could just be reaching at straws. But again, let's tug on this thread a little bit more. And also, funnily enough, we see Eleanor emit a similar kind of energy. We can figure it's not just a natural state of utilizing Anima for battle, because Purple Hair over here uses fire without emitting the glow, and I'm pretty sure the character being referred to as someone who can fight without a Crystone is Eleanor. Now, other characters can emit a glow when they're channeling their powers, however, it's not nearly in the same way as Eleanor and the Mystery Dude. Purple Fire Lady over here emits this like weird glow around her, particularly on her hair, when she begins channeling her fire powers. We can see something similar happen with the Bow Lady over here. When she sends off this paperweight, she's emitting a bit of a glow. It doesn't last for that long, but it's a glow that looks and feels fundamentally different to the Mystery Dude and Eleanor. There's just way more going on. So either they're channeling way more Anima than everyone else, or there's something else going on here. Is it strong evidence? I wouldn't say so, especially at this juncture. It's just something to keep an eye out for. You see, Abel is an observational terminal of U-DO, a way for U-DO to have a physical manifestation in the lower domain.
This form is what you have defined me as. If you call this form Abel, then I am Abel.
You're U-DO, aren't you?
I am just one of the ways that U-DO is perceived.
Abel himself as a character isn't particularly strong or anything, and was utilized in wild experiments a lot of the time, particularly to control a giant mech called Omega Res Novae. Really cool scene. But you see, my dear audience, I have been leading you a little bit astray throughout this video. Kinda like Xenosaga. U-DO is built up to be this grand villain, this ultimate endgame threat, where even the bad guys we're facing off against throughout Xenosaga are petrified by U-DO. They're instilled with this like primal, baked-in fear. But then we meet Abel, and Shion communicates with U-DO throughout episode 3. Abel just comes off like a curious but scared little boy, where the moment Nephilim comes to him is like, on your feet, beta male. He's practically glued to her, like he's gonna look both ways before they cross the street. And then he just helps us for the rest of the game. Granted, it's already at the ending, but still, he doesn't really have the vibe of a malevolent god. But to find out what his deal is, we have to go even deeper. If you just play Xenosaga, there's still a lot up in the air when it comes to U-DO. But as you may be able to guess at this point, there's a book. It's like this comprehensive strategy guide that also has a giant like Q&A section that goes over so much lore. And obviously I can't show it because Lamau copyright. But what I can do is summarize the information from said book, or at least the Xeno 10 translation. But as we've established, U-DO is an observer. He wants to see the behavior of those who want his power and observe the souls that are essentially self-destructive. Just like how there's beings in the lower domain that are interested in those of the upper domain, U-DO, a being of the upper domain, is interested in beings of the lower domain. But why? Basically, U-DO had this vision of the end of everything. Rose saw the apocalypse. Not a small-scale thing either, like the lower and upper domain just completely wiped out. That apocalypse comes about because of the quote-unquote scattering of the collective unconscious in the lower domain. I made this in Microsoft Paint and I feel weirdly proud about it. So just to recap, basically everything we know and that we really interact with is in the real part of the lower domain because it's split into two. The imaginary section over yonder, you will find things like the gnosis and the collective unconscious. Those two things are very much interlinked. So the way this grand cosmic cataclysm occurs is that the collective unconscious essentially scatters and unravels. When you die in the Xenoverse, your soul is supposed to return to the collective unconscious. However, if there is a large enough fear or reason, some kind of emotion that repels you away from the collective unconscious, primarily fear, that creates a gnosis. When that process passes a certain threshold, that's when this cataclysm occurs. U-DO knows this because he's seen it. In order to find out why this goes on, why this even happens to begin with, and everything about it, U-DO observes the lower domain, but he's a being from the upper domain. It's not easy. He can't just tune into my Twitch stream or my YouTube stream or whatever. He can't just do that. It's not that easy. But because of this, this is why he's so fascinated with the lower domain. So when people of the lower domain come in contact with U-DO, they basically see or feel that very vision of the apocalypse. It's not U-DO threatening that he's gonna wipe them all out like some comic book supervillain. It's that U-DO had that vision and now they are seeing it. The book also goes into how U-DO has this feeling of loneliness, and also how whenever someone does come into contact with him, as we've talked about, they practically go mad because of that vision. The fear is basically engraved into their soul. Well, think about it from U-DO's perspective. That doesn't feel good. When anyone even comes into contact with you, they immediately become, "Oh, be gone, Satan!" That's not a good feeling. Dude is extremely lonely. So imagine how U-DO feels when all of a sudden you have this girl called Nephilim who comes into contact with you, and unlike everybody else, she's largely unaffected. That same fear, which corrupts so many others, doesn't corrupt her. There's something special about Nephilim. U-DO became fascinated with Nephilim because of this. And the whole reason we even got Abel as an observational terminal of U-DO was so that U-DO could observe her in the real domain, even if her story's a little bit more complicated than that. But the reason Abel exists is so that U-DO can observe Nephilim. It was always Nephilim, ever since that moment. But the funny thing is, Xenoblade is reintroduced and pushed to the forefront a lot of the elements directly connected to U-DO's story with X Definitive Edition.
Tell her to live.
One of my greatest regrets is not playing Xenosaga and Xenogears before I played Definitive Edition of Xenoblade X, because it's easy to gloss over these scenes, but they do so much. I've brought up the beach scene a few times. That book that I've been talking about for Xenosaga, well, it explains that basically a character who has died, in X's case Lao here, can go to this beach in the imaginary number domain before they return to the collective unconscious, and sometimes some characters can interact with them there. In Saga, it was Shion. In X, it was Mr. How's It Poppin'. It gets really trippy because it's not like this is an actual location you can go to. It's a visualization in the imaginary domain. It's supposed to vary based on the subject, but the funny thing to me is that for like both Shion throughout Xenosaga and also this beach, they're both beaches. So like maybe the beach itself changes, or maybe there's a stronger connection between maybe Shion and Al than maybe we even think. Or maybe, my kind of opinion, they really wanted to drive home the beach connection here with Xenosaga, because the beach itself does look a little bit different, but it's essentially a way to interact with the soul before it goes back fully to the collective unconscious. The reason that is important is because we are reintroducing that concept into Xenoblade. Remember when I said they are not subtle about making connections to Xenosaga? This is arguably just as big as the radio scene in my eyes, because this goes even deeper than just making a nice little reference to Dmitry Yuriev. This is taking one of the most fundamental pillars of the story of Xenosaga and just hard dropping it in essentially the same way into Xenoblade. On top of that, X Definitive Edition really goes into how universes keep dying. They're basically making another throwback connection to Xenosaga here, and one of the big reveals of the game is that when humanity left in the White Whale, the big reveal in Chapter 13 is that the Earth itself wasn't just destroyed. It was also the whole dang universe alongside it. Same with Mira in Chapter 13. It's the same thing as in like Chapter 13 here. In fact, that's the main way we hopped universes, because we found that we could do it when the universe was dying, basically. The very big TLDR there. But the problem is, these characters in universe don't understand all of these foundational principles and the underlying structure structures of how Xeno works. I mean, they haven't played Xenosaga after all. They're LARPing, basically. They are operating with the information that they have available to them. And this threw a lot of people off when Elma said originally it's something about this world. I think Monolith might be playing that card again. I mean, they already brought back the imaginary domain basically annexed with the beach. So in my mind, what probably was happening here wasn't the destruction of a whole universe, but the destruction of a lower domain, which was something U-DO was all too familiar with conceptually in Saga. So choosing to devote basically half the plot of chapter 13 to this stuff right before Genesis is strange. But when taken alongside all of what we are talking about, it feels more like foreshadowing to me and setup, because the characters involved with all of that are possibly converging to the same location as Nephilim and Abel. That's one hell of a coincidence. U-DO also has a massive connection to the Zohar/conduit, because the Zohar itself is the contact point between the lower and upper domains. So if U-DO has control of it, then he has a better way to observe the lower domain here, since this is the connection between the two domains. He's also able to emit his energy, U-DO energy, through the Zohar conduit. It's the main thing that attracts the Gnosis. And here's the funny thing. They also reintroduced this concept in Xenoblade X Definitive Edition. In Xenoblade, they don't call it the Zohar, they call it the conduit. Which, by the way, I'm pretty sure in Japanese they called it the gate. Really on the nose there, huh? But back in the days of ancient Samar, Void, the main antagonist of chapter 13, studied the ultimate matter, the conduit. And he distilled the power into the cores of the Ares. And Al directly confirms here that by doing so, that stood up the Ghosts, which are one of the main antagonistic factions in Xenoblade X. So you have the energy of the conduit attracting the Ghosts, and it happens again and again and again. Elma's world, Ghosts, Earth, Ghosts. That's where the Ares went in both times. Mira, Ghosts, Ares cores, because the conduit's energy is in the Ares cores. And if we go to the Miran archives in Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, go to the Ares core, the classified section, Ares cores were the product of Void's research, formed by resolving the power of the ultimate matter, dubbed the conduit, into its component elements. Again, they're not subtle about this. Present at both the destruction of Earth and Elma's homeworld, they are harbingers of ruin. Elma even quotes Revelation, like the book of Revelations describing the Ghosts. It really does feel as if they're trying to draw some kind of connection between the Gnosis of Xenosaga and the Ghosts of Xenoblade X. And if that is the case, then that again basically lines right back up with Xenosaga here, with the unraveling of the collective unconscious bringing about some kind of great disaster. And with the Ghost/Gnosis being drawn to the power emitted from the Zohar/conduit. In Xenosaga, that power was U-DO from the upper domain. Maybe in Xenoblade Genesis, they're going to draw some kind of connection between the Ares cores and the 6 sons of Anshaw here. I mean, there are 6 Ares cores, I'm just saying. But a big reason I want to talk about all of this is because we are at a possible convergence point. The stories of Xenoblade and Xenosaga, as I mentioned earlier. Xenoblade 3 Future Redeemed ended with the revelation that the two worlds of Bionis and Allrest were going to separate as a result of the activation of Origin at the end of Xenoblade 3. But strangely, they came together and formed one new world. The end of Xenoblade X Definitive Edition had the people of New LA alongside various alien species we allied with throughout X's story escape from the Ghosts and the dematerialization events by jumping to a whole new universe. Could also just be a new lower domain and arriving at a strange new ring world. It's still up for debate whether that is the world at the end of Xenoblade 3 or if it's a nearby planet or something, or maybe even possibly completely disconnected. We've talked about that one to death, but I want you to keep all of that in the back of your mind. We're going to be bringing it up again. Let's cut back to the end of Xenosaga Episode 3, where Nephilim joins with Abel, Chaos, who was revealed to be the wielder of the power of anima and also was a disciple of actual Jesus Christ, and kos-mos, who was revealed to have the power of animus and who was the will of Mary Magdalene, who merged with Telos, who was the body of Mary Magdalene, who in the story of Xenosaga was the partner of Jesus. Yeah, this gets deep, by the way. Dimensionally shifted the region of space the finale took place in alongside with the Gnosis to Lost Jerusalem. Lost Jerusalem is definitely literally clarified in Xenosaga to be Earth. It's just an alternate name. They state that explicitly. Maybe the interference of the dimensional shift from the end of Xenosaga is the culprit behind why the worlds merged after Origins activation. Maybe there's some other reason for it, but it's interesting to consider. Now, the monkey wrench being thrown into the mix here is whether Xenoblade Genesis is even a follow-up. We talked about shortly after the reveal of Genesis that it's possible the game is a giant prequel, detailing the possible rise of ancient Samar. It could be completely unrelated to everything as well, even if I don't particularly buy that one myself. But let's actually address one of the possible discrepancies between the ending of Xenoblade 3, Future Redeemed, X Definitive Edition, and Xenosaga. Future Redeemed's world seemingly has no ring, though I've argued it's possible that it formed later on and the camera angle being used is specifically hiding it from view. When it comes to X Definitive Edition, well, that planet clearly has a ring. Xenosaga is clearly talking about Earth with dimensionally shifting to Lost Jerusalem. How could they be the same? Well, funnily enough, like with a lot, we returned to Xenosaga, specifically the final post-credit scene of the series in episode 3, where we see a broken down and shattered kos-mos floating through space to Lost Jerusalem. And as she drifts along, look at the planets in view: the sun, a water and land covered ring world, and a world with no ring. That ain't Saturn. If we view the worlds shown at the end of Future Redeemed and X Definitive Edition to be two separate planets, then Xenosaga perfectly accounts for this by having them be in the same system. Perhaps due to the result of Origins activation and the dimensional shift of Xenosaga, the Earth we knew didn't come back in its original form, or was heavily altered, and a new planet is now in the system. If this is true, then not only would kos-mos be on a collision course with the new worlds, not only would Nephilim and Chaos and a whole host of Gnosis be there, but also Abel, U-DO's observational terminal. They would all now be pieces on the game board along with the White Will 2, the Ares and the Ares cores, and the denizens of Bionis and all rest. All of those scattered elements finally converging. This would be the ultimate crossover of Xeno, especially with Xenoblade Genesis' name being a possible reference to episode 2 of Perfect Works, Time of the Genesis. It would be bringing Xenoblade and Xenosaga together to continue a grand retelling of Perfect Works from Xenogears, since Xenogears itself is kind of tied down with Square Enix. Ugh. But I hear you asking, Jmulls, Xenosaga, as you can read on the box, is Bandai Namco. Well, funnily enough, someone needs to tell Nintendo that, because it hasn't really stopped them. Xenoblade has continued heavily referencing or outright drawing connections between Blade and Saga, even having Bandai Namco in the credits of Future Redeemed. They themselves aren't subtle about these narrative connections. But I want to propose an alternate theory. We've already talked about how Eleanor and Mystery Dude over here might be references or straight up reincarnations, or possibly descendants, or just are Abel and Nephilim. But what if it doesn't stop there? We've put a lot of the game pieces on the board, kind of like Monolith. Now let's really play with them and bring it all together. What if Monolith aren't just trying to retell Perfect Works or fill in the blanks from Xenogears? What if Monolith's goal is to completely remake and also to retell the story of Perfect Works from the beginning, episode 1, fully fleshed out and detailed? Xenoblade and Xenosaga up to this point were episode 1, bringing all the pieces together and putting them on the board. Episode 2 would be Xenoblade Genesis. What if Nephilim and Abel are more than just references to Faye and Ellie, but are supposed to become the new Faye and Ellie for this new story? When it comes to episode 1, it's kind of vague. Humankind set out from Earth and discovered a hospitable planet in the Archer constellation. That would be Neo Jerusalem. Humans headed for the abyss of space. As a result, humanity enlarged the circle of living things to encompass almost the entire galaxy. Xenosaga kind of fits that bill. Heck, one of the big elements of Xenosaga is how humanity spread out amongst the stars trying to find a way back to Earth. At the same time, the interplanetary war which had broken out intensified. The universe became the stage for the devastation caused by the winds of war. Again, if the goal of modern Monolith is to do a retelling and to completely remake the story of Perfect Works, we have a war that kind of fits that bill or serves the same purpose here. I mean, that's just the plot of Xenoblade X. Sure, it's handled in a little bit of a different way to how it was in Perfect Works for Xenogears, but if Monolith's goal isn't to do a one one-for-one retelling of Perfect Works from Xenogears, but to make a whole new one with the same framework, then all of a sudden Xenoblade X feels a heck of a lot more important than it did back in 2015 for the overall story, doesn't it? Especially with the revelations that we get in Chapter 13 of Definitive Edition. Xenoblade X Definitive Edition will be the last full new game that we get until Xenoblade Genesis, not counting the Switch 2 editions of 1, 2, and 3. That release schedule, when we look at it through the context of what we've been talking about in this video, becomes really interesting, doesn't it? Doesn't like definitively state anything, just makes things really interesting. But also in Xenoblade Genesis, we have Xenogears references everywhere. Like this giant object in the background here that looks just like a spaceship. More specifically, it looks like the tip of a giant Philadelphia-class mothership, just like the Eldridge from Xenogears, that crashed into the world, which is what happened in Perfect Works, which is what happened in the story of Xenogears, because it is the story of Xenogears. And look at the surrounding landscape here. That looks like a crash to me. Though I will say it's kind of interesting because this looks like, from the orientation of the ship, that it like punctured through the planet this way, whereas the crater surrounding it looks like it like impacted the world this way. It'll be interesting to see how they write that, but I digress. This would line up perfectly for episode 2 of Perfect Works. And on top of that, Philadelphia-class motherships are canonical to Xenoblade now. We go back to Old Reliable, the radio scene from Chapter 5 of Future Redeemed, known officially as Philadelphia-class motherships. Actually, the funny bit when it comes to this whole radio scene here, when they talk about Philadelphia-class motherships, is kind of describing the plot of episode 1 of Perfect Works in some ways, where humanity is going out to colonize the stars. It's not the same Project Exodus as Xenoblade X, different in-game universe, but they are talking about humanity going from Earth to go colonize the stars and sending out a whole bunch of different ships to do so. And when it comes to the Philadelphia-class motherships, they talk about here, the 9th vessel departing in July heralds a new generation of ultra-long-range colony ships. Those are what is known as a Philadelphia-class mothership, and you can cram a lot of people onto one of those things. Says right there, each vessel boasts a capacity of up to 1.5 million people, and for the total project, 10 million people, all going from Earth to the stars. Next up is Faye. Faye is a reincarnation. Actually, the story of Faye and Ellie are reincarnation stories of two beings reincarnating across thousands of years. They just end up finding each other and at various points also fall in love again. Now, way back in the day of Xenogears' story, the first incarnation of Faye was known as the Contact, because the Contact met with the Wave Existence. Yeah, U-DO is a Wave Existence as well. From the Zohar. Yeah, Xenogears has that one too. You see, in the center of the Zohar's eye is a biological computer called Catamony. The Wave Existence received a mother's will from the Contact because the Contact was just a child. Catamony, the biological computer, would then create Ellie as the body, and that mother's will would be passed on from the Wave Existence to Ellie. This all took place on the planet Mictum 04 Beta. Now sit back in your seats and brace yourselves. I called the Fae that made contact with the Wave Existence the Contact, because that was the classification he was given for doing so. But that incarnation of Fae wasn't named Fae. He was named, wait for it, Abel. His name is Abel. And also in Xenosaga, Abel is in the form of a child, just like the Contact Abel was in Xenogears. I mean, come on. Absolutely crazy, right? Well, stay with me. It gets crazier. Want to know the name of the planet that the ending of Xenosaga 3 takes place on, where this scene of Abel and Nephilim takes place? That planet's name was Mictum. And sure, in English, the spelling's a little bit different, but I mean, come on, dude, come on. Isn't this crazy? I mean, the planet of the ending of Xenosaga 3, where Abel, Nephilim, and crew performed the dimensional shift, is practically the same name as the planet from Xenogears, where Abel made contact with the Wave Existence, where Ellie was originally created. Responding to him, the biological computer Catamony created a woman, which the Wave Existence imbued with a mother's will that we talked about, the original Elohim, which is like a full name. Okay, sure, that's interesting and all, but what about Catamony? I mean, that's kind of a big element of the story going on there with Xenogears. Does Xenoblade and Xenosaga even have an equivalent? Well, we can draw an equivalency here if we go to the lore that is included with the Siren model kit from Xenoblade 2 of all things. I warned you we were going deep. At At this research facility, a governing artificial intelligence collective known as the Trinity Processor was raised to maintain the gate being the conduit. The processor, using biocomputer elements, was raised in a virtual reality to gain a personality, and this system would be used to govern the gate conduit. Even the translator here, Lugal Banda, makes a note here just to be clear. The text here is referencing a system very similar to the Catamoni from Xenogears. So it seems to be the case that the Catamoni equivalent for the story of Xenosaga and Xenoblade is the Trinity Core Processor. It is our biological computer. And yeah, that's kind of interesting, I guess. I mean, sure, there are some references to the Trinity Core Processor in Xenosaga, but nothing we really need to note for the purposes of this video, and it's not like we can already draw a connection between the Trinity Core Processor and Eleanor from Xenoblade Genesis. Is that the Numa Sword as Eleanor's Anima Crystone? I mean, look at them, that can't be a coincidence. Seriously, the resemblance is uncanny here. Like, the handle's a little bit longer here compared to what is shown here, but that is one crazy coincidence. And the funny thing with this theory, in my opinion, is that every time we think we come up against like a brick wall, there's always some connection. Nothing definitive, but man, these dots are getting awfully tempting to connect. Now, this next bit gets really strange, but during the whole dimensional shift process, there's a piece to this that's kind of left to interpretation. As a brief aside before we get into that bit, it's kind of interesting to me that Nephilim calls Lost Jerusalem / Earth the land of origin, and then in Xenoblade 3 we use the origin machine. Just an interesting little connection there.
Come to the cradle.
So originally I thought this part was up to interpretation, but it turns out it was clarified in the book from before, so this is still something we absolutely have to talk about. Remember that giant apocalypse I talked about before that U-DO had a vision of? And then when people have an interaction with U-DO, they then see that apocalypse? So the universe actually has a failsafe to that. There are two main power sources for this. Anima, Animus. A character from Xenosaga, one of the main party members, Chaos, he has the power of Anima. Anima is basically the power that can just wipe out the lower domain. That lower domain, there's a bunch of them. So if the collective unconscious starts to really unravel, this failsafe can be enacted, which would wipe out that lower domain, which would suck, don't get me wrong, but it's preventing the greater apocalypse from just consuming everything, including the upper domain. But the power that controls Anima is the power of Animus. Mary Magdalene, yeah, that Mary Magdalene, had the power of Animus. The way this scene is shot, we see these like spectral forms of Chaos and Mary Magdalene basically dance around in the air a little bit here. They hold hands and they float down towards Chaos and Nephilim. The power of Anima, which is that blue one, goes into Chaos. This is the power of Animus. This is just the form that the power of Animus is taking. It is not the spirit of Mary Magdalene. That's still in Kos-mos' body. It was the spirit of Mary Magdalene that willed the power of Animus to go to Nephilim here. And this is the bit that gets really crazy. And I mean really crazy. So the reason they did this was because they had to use the power of Anima and Animus to dimensionally shift that region of space and all the consciousnesses, all the souls that were there, because that great unraveling, yeah, that was pretty much happening here. The universe was in the process of being wiped out. They had to focus all those souls together and dimensionally shift them all to Lost Jerusalem. It was basically their Hail Mary attempt at saving everything, or at least all that remained. And like even in the Q&A, it like kind of like ends off this section with saying, yeah, they might have to use the power of Anima and Animus again in the future, guys. You know, despite the fact that this was one of the final scenes of the trilogy here, and now after we remake the world in Xenoblade, the very next mainline game reintroduces Anima as a concept. Come on. As I keep saying throughout this video, it's not definitive, but if this ends up being the case, then this is one of the craziest long plays I've ever seen, because it all fits too. It all just kind of fits. We know they're not afraid of having entire characters or concepts from Xenosaga in Xenoblade. Vector Industries with the radio, bringing up Dmitry Yuriev, the beach scene from Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, and so much more. This is largely a framework they could use to tell future stories and possibly take the old perfect works and either retell it in a slightly different way or show a completely different possible set of events that may or may not take us to to the story Xenogears told us all those years ago as episode 5 of Perfect Works. One thing they could even possibly do is swap the roles of Faye and Ellie when it comes to the Xenosaga Xenoblade version of Perfect Works. What do I mean by this? Well, in the Xenogears Perfect Works, Abel was the contact, the one that made contact with the wave existence, and then Katamoni and the wave existence had a hand in creating Ellie. Well, in Xenosaga, it's Nephilim that got into contact with U-DO, which is Xenosaga's wave existence from the upper domain, and then U-DO created Abel as his physical manifestation in the lower domain. So the roles are kind of reversed here. Building off of that, in Xenogears, Faye was the main character. Ellie was important, absolutely, but Faye was the face of the game. He was the big main character. In Xenoblade Genesis, again, the roles are reversed. If Eleanor does have a connection to Nephilim, Eleanor's the MC here. Mystery Dude seems important, but he's not the main character. And he seems really important since it looks like he's riding alone with Eleanor, or at least the title reveal only focuses in on those two and the world of Anshaw. And we also have this scene of the dude like cradling what I can assume to be an injured Eleanor in his arms as he's about to like channel some mad power. But it does kind of feel like we're continuing that connection from Xenosaga, where the roles of Faye and Ellie are reversed for this iteration of Perfect Works. What will the possible ramifications for future episodes of Perfect Works be? I don't know. I don't think they're gonna go in as hard for the other episodes as they did for episode 1 of Perfect Works. But again, who knows? It's very possible that they just use this as a very light framework. For those who haven't played Xenogears and those who haven't played Xenosaga, it's kind of a recurring joke that Monolith just has kind of 5 things they like to tell about in their stories. They just can't get away from Xenogears. They just can't do it. I love it because I think this game is amazing. But this all kind of begs the question, should U-DO return or another existence from the upper domain comparable to U-DO take the stage yet again? What possible consequences will there be? I suppose time will tell on that one. Could Xenoblade Genesis be telling the story of a near godlike entity living as a regular human after years of having his physical manifestation in our world be used in all sorts of tests at the hands of the Xenosaga character famously name-dropped in Xenoblade 3 Future Redeemed Dmitry Yuriev? But when tragedy or malicious machinations begin to take root, will he have to decide between his humanity and his godhood, or possibly even the woman he's closest to? What mysteries will this enclosed world of Anshaw hold? What secrets lie within the 6 suns illuminating this mysterious world? And is U-DO the fallen god being spoken of? Or will he have to contend with the vengeance just like everybody else? Or will he even be in the story to begin with? Look, if this video doesn't prove that I desperately need another trailer, I don't know what will. Now here's where you come in. Leave a comment down below with your wildest, your wackiest, but also your best theories for what's going to happen in Xenoblade Genesis. Since I'm not expecting another trailer anytime soon, we will hold the line until the day it comes. Put them in the comments down below, and I may react to them in a future video. And if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Feel free to join the Discord in the description down below. And the theory crafting train people has no brakes. Choo choo, we're on to Xenoblade 2 Switch 2 edition. It's rapidly approaching your location, and before it does, let's see if we can predict who the next new rare blade is going to be. Want to see the candidates? You should check out this video right here for more. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye everybody, until we meet again.